The first people who know you're pregnant are often the people at the registration desk at childcare centers because you have to get onto wait lists.
Everyone cannot afford to pay for childcare and work full time.
And people will, like us, stay on a waiting list because it's $200, $300, $400 less than the other centers, that might be giving them a space.
My husband and I always joke that that people on like a third date, if they're getting along well, would say like, are you feeling this? Like if you are, like maybe we should put our name on a wait list somewhere.
From an infant's first moments, they are learning. In fact, from 0 to 3, a baby's brain is like a sponge, soaking up everything around them. But where do babies get their information? The simple answer is everywhere. From parents and caretakers to child care providers, infants' neurons are working overtime, taking it all in, which is exactly why early childhood education is so important.
What color do we go down on?
I think a lot of people don't understand how hard it is to really stimulate a child's development. And I think that's really unfortunate. They call it babysitting.
Early care and education is exactly that. It is early care and it is education, and it is building an educational program and an educational structure, much like what you do in public education or in schools.
What the rooster said?
DC has had some incredible gains in early childhood education. They are a national leader in public investments of public education. There's certainly some room for improvement, most notably around accessibility for families and affordability.
Thank you. Thanks for being a great helper.
When I was first interested in searching for childcare here in DC, Zoe was about 20 months. And, I was looking for, a nice center, something where it's very structured. They do educational learning activities, but also something that fits the needs of cost for my financial situation.
Children, what do you see? What do they see? Want to flip?
When we think about access, it's also about affordability. And so our modest income families who make a little bit more, that would deem them ineligible for subsidy. And so what happens to those families and what happens to those children?
For many, it's not just one thing when it comes to looking for childcare. It's 3: accessibility, affordability, and quality. A global pandemic added a 4th. There are holes in the childcare system, and parents and caregivers are trying not to fall into them.
The research has told us for years that the early years are the pivotal moment for a child's development later on.
Infancy and toddlerhood are a critical period in human life. We think that 90% of the human brain develops in the period from birth to age 5, and that there are approximately 1 million neural connections being made every second during that period of time.
Can you show me happy face?
We also know that there's a strong correlation between access to high quality early childhood education with college access.
Yay!
It's still kind of hard to find something affordable. The cost of living in DC, it just doesn't match, what I can afford as far as childcare. I did try to apply for a subsidy childcare voucher, but I was over the poverty level by, I want to say, $4,000, so I didn't qualify for that. So in the end, I had to end up paying out of pocket. She would go Monday through Wednesday, I had to pay $200 because I couldn't afford to pay $500 a week for childcare.
Generally, only really the most low-income families don't have what's called a copay. The subsidy covers everything. So now what happens if the subsidy doesn't cover everything? Well, most of the time the parents have to make up the difference, right? So that's a strain on families.
Yeah, flowers, look.
So the Department of Health and Human Services has recommended that no more than 7% of a household's income goes to childcare, and most families are spending much more than that. And it varies by family's income. We know that poor families spend a much higher percentage of their income when they pay for childcare. Higher income families can spend upwards of 10% too. It's a problem across the income spectrum.
And I also want her to go to daycare to get that kind of social interaction piece, because she couldn't just be home and be around me all day. Want to count your toes? 1. Yeah.
There's this notion that babysitting is, oh, you can keep the child safe, you know, you can give them something to eat, you can make sure that they are comfortable, but early childhood education is more than that. We know that children develop in domains, whether it's language, cognitive, physical, social, emotional. And what skills and strategies and techniques and practice do educators need to employ to make sure that children are developing in each domain along a developmental spectrum that prepares them not just for the next phase in life, but to prepare them for life itself?
We know how all families need some support during this important phase. We know that all our sufferings are interconnected, and so supporting all children benefits all of us. So making sure that all families have access to stable childcare benefits all of us.
It was hard for me. I definitely, that first week, I called and checked up on her like 4 times a day. But she was fine the entire time.
Good job, good job.
I don't feel like there's really any balance as far as you can't get a subsidy voucher because you make a certain amount of money. But they don't factor in other things like food, cost of living, just, you know, like simple stuff like gas, car insurance, student loans. Like, they don't factor in those other things that come into play with me living my everyday life.
But
I've definitely seen an improvement with her current center that she's going to now. She's doing really good.
There is this seemingly unlimited capacity to take in information from all of the sensory and motor sources of inputs that we have, not just by listening, not just by looking, but by moving actively through the world and exploring the environment and getting feedback, and the need for self-correction and making mistakes and having to clean it up and, you know, figuring out how others respond to me and all of these things.
Where's the butterfly? There it is.
What made me choose a family child care center because it's more intimate and it's hands-on.
What do you see?
I think children learn best because it's family style setting. We eat together, we talk together. I came up in that same setting. So the family style setting is a great way to find out what's happening with children.
Okay, you're not done, all right. It definitely takes a village to raise a child, so I'm very thankful for my strong support system that I have helping me with my daughter every step of the way, especially since I'm a first-time parent. I'm very thankful for that.
As a country, the United States is not leading the way when it comes to accessible, affordable, quality childcare. But there are bright spots throughout the country, and the city that is leading the way has been and is Washington, D.C.
I think DC leads the way because we've always had leaders and advocates who got it.
While we have an abundance of programs, we really need to pay attention to the quality of those programs and the equity of those programs and distribution of resources. There are systemic problems, but they're systemic problems that most communities would welcome.
It's no secret that finding the perfect childcare isn't easy. But add accessibility, affordability, and quality to the idea of coming to a new country and not wanting to lose the identities of culture and language.
Yo cuando llegué a este país, llegué acá en DC.
When I arrived in this country, I came here to DC, but by marrying my husband, he brought me to Maryland, and it was more difficult in Maryland. First, it was home care. Then I found a private daycare, which was also in a house. But the lady who took care of him was like a daycare, but she was too expensive. I could not pay the amount she was charging.
The struggle is finding affordable, high-quality childcare for all families. regardless of income, but particularly our low-income parents and our modest-income parents are really struggling to find childcare available and affordable. So we're seeing even less availability around childcare, especially infant and toddler seats.
Básicamente lo que nos pasó con Daniel también es en cuanto a...
Basically, what happened with Daniel also was that with home babysitting, he suffered a lot because he wouldn't be learning anything, and he wouldn't be treated right.
Maltrataban al niño y eso fue la que nos...
So that prompted us to find a daycare. And we found a daycare in Maryland, but it was too much money.
Me recomendó venir para acá, para DC.
She recommended that I come to DC and talk to me about Centro Nia.
Centro Nia is a large, nonprofit community-based childcare center. Throughout their 5 locations, they take care of about 700 children a day, and for the community they serve, they are an essential part of the early childhood ecosystem, both educationally and culturally. But like all childcare centers, they have wait lists, which can add to the stress and struggle parents and caretakers face.
Y nos mudamos para acá en DC.
And thank God that person who recommended me to come here gave me the address to this daycare. And I came to apply, and within a week they accepted my Daniel.
A la semana me recibieron a Daniel.
Although moving is not possible for all families, coming to DC was the right choice for Andrea and Juan. Centro Nia was the perfect fit for Daniel, their firstborn. But then the world turned upside down, and childcare was caught up in COVID.
Child care facilities across our region are dealing with the threat of COVID-19. Dozens of infections have been connected to facilities in Virginia, and the D.C. Health Department has investigated positive cases at multiple child care centers in the district.
Daniel estaba desesperado, preguntaba por qué cerraron el daycare.
We were home for 2 months. Daniel became desperate. He'd ask why they closed the daycare. It was 2 months that we both didn't work. It affected us a lot.
Cerraron lugares. Todito nos afectó bastante.
I think the pandemic had a really sobering impact on parents in terms of how much work it takes to have a child in your care all day long, and to not just have them in your care, but to be responsible for thinking about their needs and making sure that they're stimulated and interested.
The pandemic also shone a light on the impact of job insecurity and childcare. The challenge of not being able to afford not to work, but having to work, and having to work meaning needing childcare, but not being able to afford childcare, was a catch-22 that is all too familiar for low-income families.
For so many families, the stress of going through quarantine and losing jobs and having increased housing insecurity has been really difficult. The pandemic has caused a lot more stress on families, which is often difficult for children.
COVID also brought to the surface the essential nature of childcare. Many centers were allowed to reopen, with restrictions and limitations, sooner than other businesses.
Pero para mí Centro Nia, en pocas palabras, ha sido un centro donde
Centro Nia, in a few words, has been a place where I've seen my son receiving training in many life aspects.
No solamente en cuanto a hablar en inglés, escribir, ha sido explorado.
Not only when he began speaking English or to write, but he's been exposed. He likes to sing, he likes to play. He's a really active kid. So I'd consider that he's been well prepared like that here at the center.
Él le facilitó accesar en la escuela y
Every child needs something different, and when I think about quality for early care and education, it's really about every child getting what they need out of their experience. Children need safe environments, stability. When we talk about what helps their development the most, it's really like a good nurturing relationship with an adult or adults in their life, helping them understand how to be in the world and what their place is, just showing them that they matter. Those are some of the most critical things that show up in a kid's life.
Education is more of the accumulation of knowledge. It's the foundation of everything we do in education. I see the same thing with education, early childhood education. It's the accumulation of knowledge during this period of time, which is critical for the development of a child later on.
Studies have shown that a solid start in early childhood education can impact a child's future, meaning more graduations, fewer arrests, more college attendance, less substance abuse, and even better parenting skills.
The best of Centronia, it's because they got a place to play, and they got great teachers and great students.
Para mí, Centronia ha sido el segundo hogar de mi hijo. Porque
For me, Centronia has been like a second home for my son, because here he's learned many things, and what I can't show him or tell him, this is how you do it, it's here they help him. So in regards to him continuing his learning at home, it's very hard, because I can't be a teacher, a mother, a wife. I'm just not able to do those things with him.
No puedo hacer eso con él.
Different objects. First of all, I want to go to college. Then I want to be a chef. Next, I'm going to be a police. Next, I'm going to be a firefighter. Then I'm going to be I'm going to go to the army. If I'm still alive, I'm going to be president.
So I'd like to take a tour of your daycare. Of course. What age child do you have, and what schedule of attendance are you looking for? Funny you should ask. I'm actually like a little over 7 months pregnant, but is there anything like available next year maybe? Ooh, as it turns out, we're actually booked until the 23-24 school year. Huh.
Look at you go.
The first people who know you're pregnant are often the people at the registration desk at childcare centers, because you have to get onto wait lists.
Yes, look at you. We were definitely trying, so it was not a big surprise. I found out that I was expecting in September, maybe 2020. I knew anecdotally from being an early childhood teacher that childcare was going to be difficult to find, particularly in DC.
Wait lists are a part of childcare life. It often doesn't matter how prepared you are, even for a teacher. The waiting game can be both heart-wrenching and stress-inducing for a new parent.
I started looking at options for childcare probably a year before I delivered. So right as soon as we found out that we were pregnant, I started trying to get on wait lists, knowing that it was possible that even that wasn't going to be enough lead time, right? DC is the most expensive, and when you live in a city where everything is more expensive than most other places, it's beyond what I could ever imagine. I was raised by a single mom, and so childcare was her biggest expense. Even knowing that, like, growing up, like, oh, it's something that you'll have to think about in the future. Like, I never imagined it would be as expensive as it is. Yay! My mom had roommates, and I recently asked her, as a single mom, like, why did you have roommates? And she said, to afford childcare. So it is competitive, and it is crazy expensive. And people will, like us, stay on a waiting list because it's $200, $300, $400 less than the other centers, you know, that might be giving them a space.
We know that one of the biggest challenges for families is finding a facility that has an open seat. We know at the end of the day, all parents want what's best for their child, and parents know that what's best for their child is those three things: health and safety, nurturing, caring interactions with a consistent adult caregiver, and support for development and learning.
I didn't know about MASAC, you know, because it's a small family-owned center. We were starting to feel, I was at least starting to feel kind of desperate. Kenny was concerned about the cost of all the childcare centers. And I gave them a call and they put us on their waiting list, and they were the first center to say something like that positive about it. There's always been this attitude of like, we want you here, we hope that we can get you in, not, oh sure, we'll put you on the list.
When you get pregnant, you should call, because there's, about 27,000 infant and toddler seats. Wow. And the reason why they're so hard to come by is because there's a lower ratio of teacher and child. And so there isn't a lot out there because it is costly to provide infant and child care, and it's not a large profit margin for programs.
Azul, blue, amarillo, yellow.
MASAC, I know that they use the creative curriculum, so a lot of well-to-do families in DC look for Montessori because it has that like name, right? But I teach the same curriculum at the DCPS school. They're very play-based and focused on looking at the whole child and how they're developing naturally rather than really pushing things.
Mira, hay dos mariquitas.
I love that she's getting the foreign language exposure at a really young age and that it is Spanish. Hi, Daddy. She was about 6 months when she started, and she has grown to be a voracious early reader. She climbs into our laps and brings books over, and she will listen to book after book after book.
Muy bien. Delicioso.
We don't have a play kitchen here, but she loves to play with pots and pans. So anytime we see something, she's doing some kind of repetitive play at daycare, we try to mirror that at home.
When we allow them more freedom, when we trust children to show us what they're capable of, they do. And we're often surprised and we're often pleased. And when we challenge ourselves to get out of the way a little bit and be a little less restrictive and coercive and punitive, we actually will see them thriving more.
Ooh, yummy. If money were not an object at all, I don't think that there'd be any hesitancy about having a couple of kids. We don't want to leave the city. We don't want to have to commute and be in traffic and have less time with our family. So that's a pretty big consideration, but so is childcare and that affordability.
¿Dónde está la cabeza del carpintero? ¿Ya no? ¿Ya no? Vamos a guardar.
No parent should have to put their kid in a car and drive 2 hours a day to and from childcare. Every child deserves to have affordable, high-quality childcare in the vicinity of where they live, where they play, and where they learn.
Gotta have one in each hand, like everything, right?
What's interestingly enough is that when you think parents make, six figures, but when you think about the average home here now is like $600 and some odd $1,000. And then childcare is $20,000. That's out of the reach of a six-figure family. And when you think nationally, right? So nationally, DC looks great, but the cost of living here is astronomical. And it's impacting the decisions that families are making to have children and to educate their children.
Every family values young children. Every society, every community values young children. And I think it'll be up to us to figure out how do we translate that value into public policies and systems. And I think part of it is just choice, respecting and supporting choices that families need to make at this critical stage.
It's a lot to think about, not just space-wise with housing, but do I leave the workforce because I can't afford more childcare, another child in childcare? Do we decide we're just going to have one child? And a lot of people are making that decision. Or do we just sort of like throw caution to the wind?
So certainly a neurobiological perspective, we know that children are born with all of the neurons that they're going to have their entire life, over 100 billion neurons. We know that the brain doubles in size in the first several years of life. And we also know that by age 3, the brains have reached 80% the size of that their brain will be in adulthood.
Choosing childcare is not just about the choice of a center or a nanny or having a relative watch a baby. Going back to work, rising costs, centers closing due to challenges in finding staff, it all plays into the decision a caretaker has to make when it comes to early childhood education and the incredible importance of this phase of a child's life.
Children are learning actually before birth, but definitely from birth. Children are learning, their brains are developing, they're learning through their relationships, the interactions that they have with adults and other children, through the environments that they're in. The things that families do at home with their children are an important part of that.
Parsley. You try it? I feel like it's almost like an urban legend of looking for childcare. Even before I was pregnant, coworkers would tell me, like, as soon as you are trying, like, get on a wait list somewhere. All right, let's do it. And the whole time I was like making a Google spreadsheet of potential daycares to contact. We applied everywhere. My husband and I always joke that people on like a third date, if they're getting along well, would say like, are you feeling this? Like if you are, like maybe we should put our name on a wait list somewhere. I certainly considered not going back to work. I'd always wanted to be a parent. I was always looking forward to being a mom. And I just thought when I got pregnant, with the cost of everything, maybe I should just decide to quit my job for a bit, stay home. There were all these news articles about women who had quit corporate life in Silicon Valley to be a mom and were now trying to go back to the workforce. And they didn't want maybe like the corner office life that they had before, but they just wanted something like meaningful, emotionally fulfilling, something where they like intellectually stimulating, and they could not find anything. They could not get back in the door. And like, thank God I read those articles, because even with the cost of daycare, the cost of stepping out of the workforce for 5, 6, 7 years for a woman is also huge. It's like trial and error, right? Like you made it and then you... I think you're looking at the price of your mortgage traditionally is what you should be, or what the common cost was. So I did the calculation one time. I paid 50 grand for our son for all 3 years, and I paid 75 for our daughter.
Mommy,
Yeah,
can I take some lemon juice bites, but with ice?
With ice? Yeah, I think you could probably do that. You want some water
Lemon juice
too?
with ice.
And part of that is driven by cost of labor goes up. DC's trying to make sure people are getting paid more of a living wage. Even then, we know that like everyone who works in the industry basically is underpaid. And so yeah, DC is bananas expensive. We have such tremendous privilege to like have the option to be worried about that, right? We have the money to poke around and find a place. So yeah, it was a huge weight off.
Parents are the first teachers. So we also have a responsibility as educators to help parents be educators. They are the first teachers. Naturally, they're there.
At the end of the day, if there is a quality environment, a child is being nurtured, and they come out having a sense of their place in the world, they have a really solid foundation to start learning and building. And I don't know what the right measure for that is, but it's always a big challenge.
We haven't sort of seen early childhood as this universal public good. We continue to look at it as this unique intervention for a very specific population under certain conditions.
What we have is really fantastic, and I wish every single person could have the same. And how do we fight to make sure that all families have access to quality, affordable, safe places and educational places to leave their kids